Okay, Be'ezus Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Menachos Daf Nun Beis 52, and we're going to start from Daf Nun Aleph Amid Beis. The Sava Rab Shimon. Basically, we have a machlekes in the Gemara of there's a fact, one known fact that when a Kohen Gadol dies, the minchas chavitim, the mincha that he's supposed to bring every single day, is now the show goes on. The show goes on. It has to be brought every single day, even if they didn't anoint another Kohen Gadol that replaces him. You still need to bring the minchas chavitim. The question is, who pays for it? Reminds me like of a shul kiddush, a rabbi's kiddush, when you have no sponsor. So first Rabbi Yehuda says the Yorshim of the Kohen Gadol, even though they're not replacing the Kohen Gadol, the Yorshim of the Kohen Gadol, they pay for it. Comes along Rab Shimon, he says no. It comes from the Trumas Alishka, the Tzibur pays for it. The Minchas Chavitim during the absence of the Kohen Gadol. So that's what Rab Shimon said. And he brought a pasuk because he says Chok Olam. The pasuk in here it is. Chok Olam. Here it is. Chok Olam. It says Chok Olam. The Olam pays for it. So that's what. So that was Rab Shimon's opinion. So now we're going to go into a question. So Rab Shimon, does Rab Shimon hold Mishal Tzibur Daraisa that the Tzibur pays for this Minchas Chavitin? Is that Minat Torah? What Tan we learned in the Mishnah? Rab Shimon Shivit Dvarim Eskinu Bezdin. There are 7 things that Bezdin established. Who pays for it? And this is one of them. And so we're just going to go through. But this point of the Mishnah says clearly, Rab Shimon says, Utnai Bezdin hu, Bezdin made a rule, Kohen Gadol shemeis v'lo yiminu Kohen achar tachtav. The Kohen Gadol dies and they didn't appoint somebody else. It's the Rabbanim shetehei minchasei kareva mishal tzibur, that the tzibur should pay for the minchas Kohen Gadol in the absence of a Kohen Gadol. So how could you say Rab Shimon learns it from a pasuk? It's Doiraisa, when here in the Mishnah it says Rab Shimon says that was only Drabanan. Amar Rababo says Shnei kanas halvai. It was two initial stages. Doiraisa mititzibur. If you learned the Torah, yes, the tzibur pays for it. Now, what happened was there was an in between. Even the chachazah the komertche lishka, they saw that this is causing pressure on the tzibur. As Rashi explains, and we said this basically yesterday a little bit, that during the Migdash Sheni, there were 300 katanim gedolim. If you put that in perspective, every a year and a half, you had a new Kohen Gadol. And so there was always gaps in between appointing a new Kohen Gadol. So this put a lot of pressure on the tzibur. So they decided takinu legave b'yarshim, that the yarshim of the Kohen Gadol that died, he should pay for it. Even the chachazi the kapashi, but then they saw that the yarshim are not really coming up with the money. You know, they're claiming that they're poor or whatever, and that their father didn't leave them with anything. So this is an important point. They saw that if you leave it up to an individual or an individual family, it's not going to get done. So therefore, akmuhu adaraisa, they reverted it back to minha Torah, so that the tzibur should pay for it. Okay, so that's how you reconcile the Mishnah with what Rab Shimon said. Then the Mishnah, just to finish up this point, this is not relevant to what we're learning. Va'al para, there was a Tekanos Bezdin regarding the para duma, shaloi yehei ma'alam ba'efra. With the ashes of the para duma, there's no mi'ila. You don't violate a mi'ila like you desecrated kachim. Only if you play around with the animal, then the red heifer, then you the paraduma, then you have a mi'ila, but not once you burn the paraduma. Says the Gemara Daraisihi. I don't need Bezdin to tell me that. It's Minat Torah that the ashes are worthless. The Tanya we learned to the Brayta Chatasi, the animal is like a korban chatas, the paraduma, Only with the red animal you have mi'ila. He ba ma'alim. Only with the red animal there's mi'ila. The Ephra, we go to Amid Aleph. The Ephra ain't ma'alim. You don't have mi'ila with the ashes. So how do you sort this out? Amar Avashi state takanas have there was two takanas. Dairaisa minatara ba ma'alim. Only with the animal there's mi'ila. The Ephra ain't ma'alim. You don't get mi'ila if you use it for your private, if you play around with the ashes for your own private uses. There's no mi'ila. But what happened was, people started to use the ashes, even though there's no mi'ila, they used it for their private issues. Because of they used it for healing purposes. They would take the ashes of the parabduma, believing that it brings healing, it has healing power, and they would rub it on sick people. So Gazer by Me'ila, then they said there's a Me'ila on it. Oh, once you're saying that there's Me'ila on it, then people are not going to use it, because if someone was not sure if he's tummy or not, he's going to say, oh, why should I have the ashes sprinkled on me when I might get the Me'ila? So people who are Suffolk Tumah would not come to become Tahar. So that's another problem. People who are Suffolk Toma would not want to come to be sprinkled, because they're figuring that, oh, there's a chance that I'm not Tameh, and if I'm being sprinkled, so I'm using the ashes for my own uses, and then I'm over a carbon me'ila. So so they establish it like with the raisa, there is no me'ila on the ashes. So that's how that worked. Let's go new Gemara. Tanar Rabbanim. Par helam davar shetziba usirai by dezara. The par helam davar shetziba, which we had that, it's one cow when everybody made a mistake, right? Everybody through the Bezdin made a mistake on, let's say, eating chaylev, or everybody did avodah zara. So the Torah tells you through Bezdin, of course, that you pay for a cow or for the goat. How did they pay for it? Right? Everything has to be accounted for. So, Betchila Magbin Lahem. They made a new assessment, and everybody had to chip in from all the Shvatim. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says, they took it from the already collected funds from the Machzas Shekel, and that's how they paid for the Par Helam Davar. They didn't make a new collection. Says the Gemara. Now, we paskin always like Rabbi Yehuda. So, Vatanya Ipcha, but we learned the positions are reversed. Whatever Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Shimon says what Rabbi Yehuda said. So since we don't know, it's important for us to know, hey menayach risa, what was Rabbi Yehuda's final opinion? Because I'll know what we paskin like. Is it the brisa that Rabbi Yehuda says you make a new collection, or does Rabbi Yehuda say mitrumas alishka hein boy? So Amruhu Rabbanan Kamed Rabashi. And the Rabbanan said to Rabashi, Leime Kamaisa Achrita. It must be that the first brisa was the one that was said last. Why? So, and in other words, Rab Shimon's opinion is Mitrumas Alishka Hein Boy. And that's the final opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as Mitchila Magbin Alehem. Why? The Shemina le Rab Shimon, the Chayis L'Pshia. We find Rab Shimon, we already said before, Rab Shimon is always, if you put it on the people, they're not going to come up with the money. So therefore, you make the tzibur pay for it, and we saw that by over there by the Kohen Gadol, that we don't force his children to the Yorshim to pay it, because if we put it on them, they're not going to come up with the money for the mincha, for the Kohen Gadol's mincha after he died. So we see Rav Shimon is always highest for negligence. So make sure that the Trumas Alishka pays for it. Amalu Ravashi said, even if you want to say that Rav Shimon holds over here that you make a new collection. Even over here, Rav Shimon would agree you make a new collection. When does Rav Shimon chayesh for negligence? By something that has no kapara value. When you're going to ask the Kohen Gadol's Yorshim to pay for the mincha every day, they get nothing from it. They don't get a kapara from it, so they're not going to pay for it. But here, if you make a collection for people from the tzibur to pay for the Par Helam Davar Shal Tzibur Asira Avodah Zara, everybody's going to chip in because they get a kapara. The Milsa the Isle Kapar Gavar, Rav Shimon is not worried about negligence, that you're not going to be able to collect the money. People will come up the money for the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur because everybody wants it, because it brings about a kapara. So my have Allah, what was the bottom line of this whole thing? What was the opinion of Rab Shimon, and what is the opinion of Rab Yehuda? Amalei Rab Zuta, Barabashi, Tashma coming here. I knew we learned to the Braisa as Karbani, Lachmi, Lishai, Reach, Michaychi, Tishmuru, La'akravli, B'mayadai. So the Pasuk calls the carbon tamid by a bunch of different names, and it says you should make sure to makrav it at its appropriate time. So everything has a din like a parad, like the Eilas HaTamid. The rabbis parhelam davash atzibo siira abaydazara shaboy mitrumas alishke divrab Shimon. That includes the parhelam davash atzibo and the siira abaydazara, that they come from the Trumas Halishka, and therefore the Tzibor pays for it. And these are the words of Rav Shimon. So Rav Shimon holds it comes from the Trumas Halishka, just like the Carbon Tamid comes from the Trumas Halishka. Therefore, that was the final opinion of Rav Shimon. Since he brings a pasuk, it must be that's his final opinion. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you make a new collection. And since we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, when Mashiach will come, and if there's we need to bring a Par Helam Davash Atziba, Sira Vaidazara, we're going to paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, that you make a brand new collection. You don't go to the Trumas Halishka to take the money. Then the Mishnah said like this: bottom line is, the pasuk says, we have the psukim here, that when a Kohen Gadol, when he's alive, he brings a Isarin soil ephah, which is about half a gallon of flour, right? And he divides it in half, and we saw the pictures yesterday. What does he do? He brings half in the morning. He makes 6 challahs. And here it is. He makes 6 challahs in the morning, and he makes six, I call it matzahs, in the afternoon. 6 of them he burns on the mizbeach in the morning, and 6 in the afternoon. He divides it in half. When he died, very important, they didn't do this thing of dividing it in half. What they did was they brought the whole Isarin in one shot. That's what we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan asked the question: they bring the full Isarin in the morning, and they did a full Isarin in the afternoon. Whereas when the Kohen's alive, you do bring one Isarin, you split it in half, and you do half in the morning, half at night. The question is, when the Kohen Gadol dies, and we have a drasha, when he dies, you have to bring one Isarin. Does that mean you bring one Isarin for the morning and one Isarin at night? Or you just bring one Isarin one time a day? Dilma Shlema Shachris, Ubetela Ben Rabbayim. You bring one Isarin during the morning, and that's it for the rest of the day. Amar Rava says, Tashma coming here, Shmidi bechavitim. The 8th Kohen that was chosen in the lottery, he helped the Kohen Gadol with his chavitim. Now, for the chavitim of the afternoon, okay, there was a Kohen, a lottery, and there was a Kohen always helping with the chavitim in the afternoon. Now, if it's true, if it's true, when the Kohen Gadol dies, they didn't bring the minchas chavitim in the afternoon, so then they didn't have to make this lottery. Shmini bechavitim hechadami. There are times that they didn't have to have an 8th Kohen with the chavitim. Hechadami, how so? The Meis Kohen Gadol aminu achatachtav. If the Kohen Gadol died, so they didn't bring a minchas chavitim in the afternoon. So how could the Mishnah say always you had an 8th Kohen helping out with the chavitim in the afternoon? It's not true. Sometimes when the Kohen Gadol dies, they didn't need this 8th Kohen. Amru Rabbanan Kamed Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Bevloi Tipshoi. He says that's a stupid raya, and the Babylonians are silly people, and the reason why Mishum Diyasru Ba'asru D'Chashaycha, they sit in a place that's very dark, maybe because Babylon is in a valley, so it doesn't get too much sunlight. They say dark things. In other words, your raya is totally off base. Let's say the Mishnah says that Mishnah has something wrong with it too. It says the seventh kohen always helped out Besoilis with the flour, chi beyain with the wine of the oilas tamid, right? There was flour and wine brought along with the oilas tamid. Did you always have to bring the flour and the wine? The Torah tells us that the nesachim is not so important. You don't have to bring it on the day that you bring the carbon tamid. You can even bring it by night. You can bring it the next day. You can not bring it. It's not. It doesn't hold back the kashrus of the tamid. So why didn't the Mishnah say? Why did the Mishnah say you always need a seventh kohen and a ninth kohen? Ella the e like katani. That's the way you're supposed to read it. The e like katani. If on an impossible thing, a once in a while thing, that's what the Brisa doesn't. The Mishnah doesn't talk about unusual thing. Achinami Eloi the e like katani. The if and Kohen Gadol dies, that's not what the Mishnah is talking about. A normal day. A normal day, there's a Kohen Gadol there. You bring a morning mincha, an afternoon mincha. So that the Mishnah doesn't discuss the situation when he died, that's unusual. Adru Kame Derar, they brought this question to Rava. Ama mibishtustin ka amri kamai mitivusin like amri kamai. They only say the things that we say that are wrong, are not so. We're not so proud of. But we said a good svara. Again, what is our question? Our question is that when the Kohen Gadol dies, the Torah tells you bring one isarin, right? When there is no Kohen Gadol in the office, you're still supposed to bring one isarin. Do you bring one isarin for the morning and one isarin for the night, or you just bring one isarin for the entire day? Rava said, Hadama Rava, Haminami Tivusihi. Amakra, the Torah says, Soilus Minchas Tamid. The Torah calls the Minchas Chavitin like a Tamid. It's like a Minchas Tamid. Just like an oilas tamid, you have an oil in the morning, oilas tamid in the morning, and an oilas tamid in the afternoon. So also the Kohen Gadol's mincha, even when he's dead, right? There is no Kohen Gadol in the office, so you're bringing an entire isarin. You bring one isarin in the morning and one isarin in the afternoon, and that's why we say, "I have a law." What's the bottom line? We have a brisa. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Shleima shachris or shleima ben arbayim. They brought it completely in the morning, and they brought it completely in the afternoon. Complete isarin in the afternoon. Now, remember, let's think of the picture. The mincha of chavitin needed 3 bottles, 3 lugs of oil, plus every mincha needed what's called lavoina. If you remember that, hold on. Okay, lavoina. It needed a spoon of a lavoina. Here is the lavoina. Here we go. This is how they make it. Okay, we make belila, and this a handful of lavoina. You see what he's putting? A handful of lavoina. Now, pligiba ababestoy rabbanon. There's a machlokes between Abastoy and Rabbi Yochanan. Abastoy I'm after shnei kamotzim l'shalavoina. A regular kohen, he takes one isarin, a kohen gadol that's alive. He brings a half of isarin in the morning and a half of isarin in the afternoon. And he brings 3 lugs, right, of wine, of oil, right? What do you do with those 3 lugs? You split it in half. You use 1.5 bottles for the morning and 1.5 bottles for the evening. What about lavoina? How much lavoina do you put? A half of full, or 1 scoopful, or 2 scoopfuls? So Rab Distoy says, you put a full kaimitz in the morning and a full kaimitz in the afternoon. They only brought 1 scoopful of lavoina. They brought half in the morning, half in the afternoon. What's the machlekes? We never find that you bring a half a koimitz of lavoina, and since you're bringing a half of isarin in the morning, you're not going to bring a half a koimitz. So you bring a full koimitz of lavoina, like you see in the picture. like you see by the carbon mincha. You bring one full kaimitz, even though the flour is going to be divided in half. Rabbanan says, Rabbanan Sabri Rabbanan hold le'ashkechan isarin the boy shnei kamatzin. But we don't find in isarin silas. At the end of the day, you look at how much flour is he bringing. He's only bringing in isarin a half a gallon, a little more than a half a gallon of flour. So you're not going to require him to bring 2 scoopfuls of levina. So it's machlekes. Do you bring 1 scoopful or 2 scoopfuls? Abba Yossi ben Destoi says you bring 2 scoopfuls. Now we go to the next step. What happens? That's when the Kohen Gadol is alive. By Rabbi Yochanan, Kohen Gadol Shemeis, if the Kohen Gadol dies, lo yiminu achatachtav, and they didn't put anybody to take his place, we go to Amid Beis. The Rabbanan, huchbel levayna soy loy. Since according to Rabbanan, you're anyway bringing an isarin in the morning and an isarin in the afternoon. You're bringing a full isarin because the Kohen Gadol died, like we said before. So, do you now, according to Rabbanan, will you bring a whole kaimitz for each isarin in the morning and a whole kaimitz of levina for the one in the afternoon? You see, Amrinim, do you say since you double the flour, so therefore, according to Rabbanim, normally you bring a half a kaimitz per. Here you're going to bring a full kaimitz of levina because you're doubling the flour. Normally you brought a half a isarin. Now, when the Kohen Gadol dies, you bring a full isarin, so you double the levina. Or maybe my de gali gali, my de loy gali loy gali. Whatever they tell you double it, the Torah told you double the flour because it said oisa, double the flour. When the Kohen Gadol dies, you double the flour. It didn't tell you to double the levina, so maybe you don't double the levina. V'shemen bein laba miyastoy bein labona maho. Even according to Rabbi Yossi, who always said you brought 1 kaimitz, right? You brought 2 kaimitzes of levina, but could be that was by you're not doubling the flour. Could be he will hold that since you're doubling the flour, you also double the oil. So instead of bringing 3 bottles of oil, since you're going to bring 2 isarins, right? 1 for the morning, 1 for the night. So you should double the bottles of oil. You should have 6 lugim. So that was the question. So the Gemara gives a teretz, Amarava, Tashma, come in here. Hey, kamatzanim. The Mishnah says there are 5 times of you do kemitza. You do a kemitza of levina. Then Isa, if it's true that you double the levina, zimna mishkachas lozayin. Sometimes you're going to bring 7. There's cases where you're going to bring 7 kemitzas. There's 7 cases of where you bring a kemitza. Because when the Kohen Gadol dies, you bring a kemitza for the isarin that you're giving in the morning, and a kemitza of levina for the isarin that you're doing in the afternoon. So we see that this Mishnah holds that you don't double the kaimitz, because if not, the Mishnah should have mentioned it. Answers the Gemara, the E like a honey. That's not a proof, because maybe the Mishnah is not mentioning cases where the Kohen Gadol died. Yes, you're right. When the Kohen Gadol dies, you'll bring kaimitz for each for the morning and for the afternoon. But that's not the subject of this Mishnah. Yosef Rapapa v'kamal Shmaitza, Amalei Rav Yosef Bashmaitza Mashmaya the Rapapa. He said to Rapapa, "V'mala kaimitz b'chutz e hava ukutani." Bringing a kaimitz in the outside of the Beis Hamikdash, which is an E, a case of if, and if something goes wrong and you're putting a kaimitz, you're makar of a kaimitz outside the Beis Hamikdash, it's not a regular situation, ukutani, and the Mishbraisa does mention it. So hey kamatzin is not a raya either way. So my havala. What's the bottom line over here? Do you double the oil? Do you double the levina? Because when the Kohen Gadol dies, the Torah tells us you double the flour. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Tashma, come in here. The Tanya we learned to the Brisa, Kohen Gadol shemeis v'lo yiminu achatachtav. Kohen Gadol dies. There's no one taking his place. Shleima shachar shleima rabbayim. You double the flour. You bring a holy sarin in the morning and a holy sarin in the afternoon. Umafresh lo beis kamatzin, and you give 2 kemitzas of levina. Kaimitz shachar, kaimitz bein arabayim. So here it says that you give 2 kmitzas. But you use the same amount of oil as if you brought 1 isarim. And you use loy gemechza shachris, loy gemechza ben arbaim. So although you're bringing 2, doubling the flour, you still use the normal oil. So the Gemara says, Mani, who's the author of this Mishnah? If you're holding that you double everything, you double the flour, you double the levina, which is why you're bringing 2 kmitzas, then why don't you double the oil? You should bring 6 lugim. Ella Abba Yosoi ben Dastoihi. It's Yossi ben Dastoi. The Omar Chavitin Kohen Gadol ba'alma shnei kamotzim. He holds that every Kohen Gadol, when he's alive, he brought 2 scoopfuls of levina. And you don't double the levina when he dies. You're not going to double the oil when he dies. And same thing according to they're all linked with each other. Since you're not doubling the oil according to Abba Yostoi ben Dastoi, so even according to Rabbanim, levina v'shamra l'Rabbanim lo yichbelu. Even according to Rabbanim, you're not going to double the oil. You're not going to double the levina, because they're only arguing when the Kohen Gadol is alive. The Kohen Gadol's alive. That's where the machlekes to Rabbanim and Abba Yostoi is. When the Kohen Gadol dies, they technically agree with each other. So therefore, if Rabbi Yossi ben Dastoi says don't double anything, just the flour, whatever the Torah tells you, so Rabbanim would agree with that. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rabbi Yossi ben Dastoi. Halacha is like Rabbi Yossi ben Dastoi, concludes the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hachi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, halacha sta Mishnah, utnan chamisha kamatzin heim. But there's only 5 kmitzas, and according to Rabbi Yossi ben Dastoi, according to him, there would actually be another case where a Kohen Gadol, every Kohen Gadol brings extra kmitza. According to Rabbi Yostoi ben Dastoi, every Kohen Gadol, here the Mishnah doesn't mention that. So it must be that this Stam Mishnah holds like the Rabbanim. So answer Gemara, Amaroininu, Balib the Rabbi Yochanan. It's Machlekes and Amaroim. Taka one opinion, Rabbi Yochanan Paskin like the Rabbanim. But then there's another opinion, Rabbi Yochanan Paskin, like Rabbi Yosoi ben Dastoi. Bottom line is a Kohen Gadol, that's the machlekes. We paskin like Rabbi Yosoi ben Dastoi, according to Rabbi Yochanan. And how much levina do you bring? You bring 2 scoops. Since the Kohen Gadol is going to divide it in half and bring half in the morning, half at night. So according to Rabbi Yosoi ben Dastoi, you bring 1 scoop of levina for the morning and 1 scoop for the afternoon. Okay, we'll stop here.
Yeah.
Okay, good to that.